It's great to be here. For those of you who are a little bit suspicious about the Aussie, actually Jeff's a fully fledged New Zealander. He's just an imposter living in Australia. And I'm an honorary citizen of Paihia, so I'm a dual citizen by rights. Okay, my name's David Engwich. I got my start in this business back in 1987 when I went to a public meeting, probably a bit like this, and it was a meeting about the widening of a road through our neighbourhood. And I moved a motion at that meeting that we oppose the widening of the road, and for my trouble I ended up on the committee, and for the next 3 years of my life I was a protester trying to stop a road widening. And I learned a lot about the way cities work during that time, and 3 years later I'd written 2 books, and one of them had become an underground bestseller, and the other one was used as a text in university courses, and I found myself travelling around the world as some kind of guru on the creation of community and how we form our cities, etc. I actually got involved in another 2 road widening battles, and one day I realised that I was spending all of my life protesting and being a negative person. And so I decided after one of these that I would never ever fight another negative campaign again, and I would devote my life to doing positive things for communities, and you'll see some of the story that comes out of that. Okay, the agenda for tonight is as follows. I'm going to start with some ground rules. These are the ground rules for a 7-day makeover, so we'll just run you through those. I'm going to talk a little bit about the art of placemaking. So a couple of insights about how we go about creating great public spaces. I'm going to talk about a frustration that we had with working with communities where we seem to be going round and round in circles, and then a significant breakthrough that we had which started in Auckland, ended in Paihia. We'll then talk about how the 7-day makeover will work and how you can get involved in that. And then finally, time for some questions. Okay. I know we'll have, I'm sure they'll sell you popcorn and stuff outside, with not actually providing you with tea and coffee. Okay, the ground rules. First of all, we're here to build a great public place, no moaning or blaming. So we're not here to revisit history. Now, I acknowledge, I know the pains that you've had over a number of issues, the water issue, etc. Tonight is not the night we're addressing that. We're addressing how to make your town a great place. And so I'm hopeful that you will agree to this rule that we're going to be positive about creating a great town centre as opposed to revisiting history. Is everybody happy with that rule? All right, fantastic. The second one is we're going to do it with the resources we have, not with what we wish we had. No wish lists. Now, most public meetings like this, we ask you, what would you like to see in your town centre? And you'll give me some fantastic wish list of gold-plated this and whatever. And it bears no relationship to the resources that we've got. So one of our golden rules with the makeover is we work with the resources that we've got. We're starting with $22,000 in our resources bank. We hope to build that over time. But when we come to do the makeover, we will be working with what we got, not with what we wish we had. So is everybody happy with that? All right. Number 3, we're going to start small but be extremely creative. If you've only got limited resources, you have to be extremely creative. So we all happy with that one? Good stuff. And we will take responsibility for delivery. No drivers, no projects. We are not asking somebody else to do this for us. This is about you getting on board, your neighbours getting on board, your friends getting on board. Even if you can only give an hour, it will all add up to make a difference. You'll see examples of the kinds of things your town can do. But this is about the community taking responsibility for creating a great town centre. Everybody happy with that one? Great. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about placemaking. I define placemaking as being a lot like homemaking. A homemaker takes a house and turns it into a home. A placemaker will take a public space and turn it into a place. Now, if you think of a house where the moment you go through the front door or the back door and you instantly feel at home, what is it that makes you feel at home in that space? Now, you are allowed to talk to me at this stage. Yell it out. Art. What else makes you feel at home? Somebody said cooking smells. You know, our experiences of home are entirely mediated via our senses. It's all about colour, warmth, sounds, etc. And yet when we think of our town centre, how often do we think of it as a sensory experience? Okay, what else makes you feel at home? Sorry? The welcome you get. Thank you so much for that. Sometimes if I'm working with planning professionals, I often get to the end of this exercise and nobody has mentioned that somebody was acting as the host and welcomes you into the space. Can be the family dog. But again, we never think about, if we want a great town centre, who are the hosts? Who are the welcoming hosts that are welcoming people into the space? Okay, what else makes you feel at home?
Comfy furniture.
Comfy furniture. All right, let's test this out. How many people prefer that the lounge chair that you're about to sit on, the homeowner removes the plastic seat covering off of the brand new lounge chair just before you sit down? Or do you prefer a little bit of wear and tear on the lounge chair? So we'll take a vote on this. Those for the plastic sheet, the brand new lounge chair? 3 of you, okay. I'll wait until you've answered a couple more questions, but we might have to send you out to the psychologist that we've got waiting out in the other area. Okay, all of those for the little bit of wear and tear? All right, let's do a similar test. I'm going to give you a choice between pristine order and the smell of pine disinfectant or a little bit of mess. All right, so all of those for the pristine order. Same people, you're definitely on your way out to the psychologist. All of those for a little bit of mess. Now again, usually when we're making over a town centre, it's all about creating order and getting, we used to have the tidy towns movement, didn't we, many years ago, where we thought that a great town centre was all about creating order. We now know that there is a psychological reason why we are attracted to a bit of mess and a bit of disorder in a public space. There is nothing new that can ever emerge out of a totally ordered universe. Chaos is the matchmaker of evolution. We would not have ever evolved as a species unless there was chaos within the environment. So there is a reason why us humans tune into a little bit of chaos and feel more at home there. Okay, we won't extend this exercise. We can go on. For example, people will say the feeling that I can put my feet up on the coffee table, or the feeling I can go to the fridge and help myself to a beer. Or the Marys will say the feeling I can go and start washing up. Now, what do we say about a person who does any of those activities? What do we say they're doing? Making themselves at home. And here is the difference between a display house and a home. In a display house, you are a passive observer of a theatrical performance put on for your benefit by the homeowner. In a home, you are made to feel as if that space is your home and you can act as if it was your home. You understand the difference? So we are looking to turn, and there's lots of council staff here. I tell them this to their face, it's okay. I say they're really, really, really good at creating the feeling of a display house in town centres. It's all nice and pristine, but you are a passive observer of that performance. And what we're about is taking that display house and turning it into a home. Now, what is fascinating, I've done this exercise, this question, with thousands of design professionals, I have never yet had a design professional or anybody in an audience like this say to me, what makes me feel at home is that the homeowner employed a very expensive interior designer. Now, I want you to think about this, and this may sound a bit politically incorrect, but poor people are often better homemakers than rich people. And the reason is that they're forced to furnish their house with soul, with generosity, with their inner spirit, as opposed to trying to do it just with money. And I'll say this very clearly, it doesn't really matter how much money we've got to spend on your town centre. It's about you furnishing your own town centre with imagination, with generosity, with heart. Okay, let me spell this out a little bit more for you. This is my granddaughter Nikita. When she was 2 years old, she badly cut a finger. Every time her mother changed the bandage on her finger, she would cry and say, "Mummy, I want to go home." And her mother would explain to her that she was at home, she was standing in the lounge room, and that would make Nikita even more upset, and she would stamp her foot and say, "No, I want to go home." And my daughter said to me, "Dad, why can't my 2-year-old understand that she's in her own lounge room?" Does anybody know why? No? Home is a place of no pain. For a 2-year-old, home is a feeling, it's not actually a location. And what we're going to be focusing on in the 7-day makeover is creating a feeling. We are not creating a location. In other words, we want to create a place in which every person sitting in this room tonight feels that they belong to a vibrant town with a strong civic heart, and you're proud to be there. You feel like you can flourish into your fullest potential. You do not feel like you've been held back in any way. That's the kind of feeling. And we will start the 7-day makeover with actually discussing this question. What feeling do we want people to have when they arrive in Westport? What feeling do we want the locals to have when they come to their town centre? That's our design brief. Our design brief is to deliver that particular feeling for people. It is not about what fancy things we might put in the space. Now, I'm going to just give you one of the secrets of placemaking, and this is just to whet your appetite, but also to get you thinking. We're going to give you 3 of these secrets at the actual 7-day makeover. But the thing that's missing for most people is how do I go about revitalising my town centre? What needs to happen? Okay, so let me ask you a question. What do you think the number one attractor of any public space is? What is it that makes us, if we're travelling through a town, for example, want to stop our van and get out and go exploring in that town? What's the number one thing? People. If you drive through a town and there's nobody in the street, or if you walk past a coffee shop and there's nobody in the coffee shop, and then you 3 doors up, there's a coffee shop full of people, which one do you go to? How many of you have ever been to a famous tourist destination and you've got there and looked around and said, what the hell is actually here? There's a saying about King's Cross in Australia, which is, the only thing to see in King's Cross is all the people who went to see what's in King's Cross. It's the vibe. It's all of the. It's something about the place. It's the buzz. All right. Now I'm going to throw you a riddle. I can make your town twice as appealing by putting twice as many people in the main street of your town, without one extra person stopping in town or coming to your town or visiting your town centre. Can anybody work out how we do it? And we don't do it with mirrors. It is genuinely, we will put twice as many people, make your town twice as attractive without attracting one additional visitor. Sorry? Have a feel-good space. What does that do? Who said twice as long? Okay, you're the next international expert. You're going to be travelling around. If we get people to stay twice as long in your town centre will be have twice as many people and be twice as alive. There's an Australian farmer called Peter Andrews who's revolutionised the way that degraded farmland has been rehabilitated across Australia, and I assume probably here as well. And the first thing and he was considered a maverick for about 30 years. They thought he was crazy, but now his methods are being lauded everywhere. The first thing Peter Andrews does to rehabilitate a degraded farm is that he slows the flow of the water through the farm. He puts logs in the stream, he puts rocks in the stream, he creates diversion banks. And this is a direct statement from Peter Andrews. He says, if I can get the water to stay 7 times longer on the land, it does 7 times the work hydrating the soil. And the proof is if you fly over one of his properties that he's rehabilitated, it will be vibrant green while all the farms around it are parched brown. So in the same way, the number one secret in revitalising your town centre, as crazy as it sounds, is simply to slow the flow of the people as they move down the footpath. And we call that linger nodes. So one of the things I talked to the retailers about this morning was a sandwich board is the least effective way to communicate the nature of your business. This is in Taree. Can anybody guess what kind of a business this is outside of? What's the business? A bank or an accountant? It's actually an accountant. Now this is a linger node. It not only, you will never see a kid interacting with a sandwich board, but even the adults who walk past this giant abacus have to engage, and so this slows the flow of the people down the street. Your businesses, your retailers have an incredible role to play in helping bringing the street to life by slowing the people flow. This is pie here. This is a $68 linger node. So we are not talking mega bucks here to make this stuff happen. In one town there were low brick walls on all of the street corners. You've actually got some stone ones up the road here. Every time I see something like that, I say, how can I turn this into a linger node? And I suggested that they simply glue foreign coins along the top of the wall and that a retailer hand out pencils and paper for kids to do pencil rubbings of the coins. Cost you nothing, except for the loose change in the bottom of your drawer that you're never going to spend. This is one of the most popular linger nodes I've ever seen. This is just piles of rocks in the Boulder, Colorado Mall in Colorado. Every kid that goes past has to stop and climb on these rocks. Sometimes the linger nodes is about us just simply relocating something. This is Taree in New South Wales, and we found this carved goanna at the local art gallery. It was just sitting in a piece of grass that nobody ever went to, and I said, can we have that for our 7-day makeover? Now we've got this fabulous linger node in the street where it's getting used much more often. So one of the things I'm going to be asking you to think about is where are the resources in your town that have been underutilised that could be better utilised as linger nodes within your street? Okay, let me deal with our frustration. Now this all started, I don't know how many years ago, but I'd been doing a lot of work with councils, and I was asked by a council in Auckland to do a town centre plan for one of the little villages in the Auckland area. And I asked the planners what their budget was. And they said $50,000, and I said, well, I'm assuming that's my fee. How much is there for the actual implementation of what I recommend? And of course, I got the standard response, which is, well, we won't know until you've done the study, and therefore the money is for making it happen will be in some future budget. Now, I'm not a planner by profession, and I thought, I've heard this story a few times now, and my guess is that the report that I write will never ever see the light of day, that they'll never get around to putting the money in the budget to actually make it happen. So I said, I am not going to be a fraud on this community and involve them in an engagement process when I know darn well that what I recommend is probably never going to be implemented. I said, I'll do a deal with you. I said, I'll take $5,000 as my fee, and the other $45,000 I'm going to put on a table, and I'm going to run a workshop where I say to the community, let's find the most creative thing we can do with that $45,000 to transform your town centre. And that was the start of a process. From then on, I was not prepared to ever engage with a community in a hypothetical planning exercise. Now, let's just run through how this currently works with most councils. The council puts some money into the budget for a planning exercise. Nothing in the piggy bank to make it happen, because as I said, they go, well, we don't know what we're going to make happen until you've done your study. So that money is given to a consultant who is going to do a plan. He runs a community engagement process. Now, does anybody know what happens if you engage an architect to design you a house but you don't give them a budget? So what happens when you call the community together and you say, what do you want in your town centre, or what do you want in this space? What's going to happen? You're going to get a whole list of unaffordable wishes. Oh, we'd love this, we'd love that. It bears no relationship to the reality of what's available. I call that an unaffordable wish list. So we put all those wonderful wishes in a report, and we put it beside all the other reports. The town naysayers, and look, I've got to say, I'm really impressed that Westport has none of these people in it. I'm just blown away by that fact. But most other towns actually have some naysayers, and so they start going, no way that we're going to have that, and whatever was in the report, even though it couldn't have been afforded anyway, they've got to oppose it. So the politicians get really nervous about all this noise that's been made by the naysayers, and so the things start coming out of the report one by one. Oh, well, we can't do that, until there's nothing left on the plan anyway. So all the doers in town decide that they may as well check out. They're not interested in coming to talk fests where nothing ever comes of it. The only people left in the process are the people addicted to talk and to creating unaffordable wishes, and the one-eyed axe grinders. So after 5 years of nothing happening, guess what we do? We commission another study, but we don't put anything in for doing it, and we go round and round this cycle over and over again and wonder why you, the community, are pissed off with council. Council feels hamstrung. We're getting nothing done. We just keep going round and round this circle. Now, I know this is probably news for you. You've probably never seen it quite picturised like this. But I can tell you in most councils, this is what is happening. This is the cycle that we go through. And it's illustrated by the story I told about the town that asked me to do a town centre plan. Now, not long after the Auckland experience, I was approached by a town called Paihia in the North Island in the Bay of Islands. They had just spent the last 12 months as a community working on a master plan for their community. This was the master plan that they had produced. Now, I need to let you know, Paihia is a town of 1,700 people, and this is their $25 million pipe dream. Talk about an unaffordable wish list. And they approached me and they said, David, could you help us start implementing our grand master plan? And I said, I don't make plans anymore, I only make places. And unless you've got some money to work with, then there's nothing I can do for you. I'm not here to help enhance your dream. So they went to their council, they got $5,000, and I said, okay, now I can help you. And I ran a 2-day workshop, and I said, my job is to help you find the most creative way to spend that $5,000. Now into that, the community put things that they could donate, like one guy said he was willing to donate a bathtub full of broken glass that he'd collected off of the beach. There are all sorts of things went into what we call the resources bank, so it's not just the council money. This is the space that they chose to make over. It was a dead little corner of town that nobody ever used. And they had what we call a sprint, which is they were going to make this space over in just 3 days. Now, they had some planning time before that. We didn't have a 7-day makeover at this stage, but they made it over in 3 days with 100 volunteers. And here they are all working on this space. And this is the little town square that they created for $5,000 in 3 days. Now, this blew the town's mind. They suddenly saw this dead space come to life. There were people in there all the time. These wave seats were, you almost had to take a ticket to be able to get a seat on the wave seat. They were so popular. Now, this lady up here, Kath, she was in that workshop, and she said, and she was on the board of Focus Pie here, which are the ones that had raised the $5,000. And she said, look, at David's workshop, we actually came up with 5 great ideas for our town, but we only had the money to implement 1. Why don't we implement the other 4 ideas that we came up with at that workshop? And here's a revolutionary thing she said. She said, let's not go back to council and ask them for another $5,000. Why don't we raise the money ourselves as a community? And she set up this op shop. And in the course of a few months, in a town of 1,700 people, dear old retired Kath raised the princely sum of $45,000. I said, I'm so blown away, I'm getting on a plane at my own expense. I'm going to come back, I'm going to run another 2-day workshop. We're going to find the most creative way for you to spend that $45,000. So I did that. This is why I've been made an honorary citizen of the town. You'll see as we go. Out of that came 8 new projects. So the original 4, and then there was another 4 projects that were added that they thought they could do with that $45,000. This is just a snapshot of those 8 projects being implemented, the community all working together to make them happen. Now, one of the spaces that they wanted to make over was this toilet block. This was the town disgrace. This is where all the tourist buses pulled up. This was people's first impression of their town. And some tourist had written on the wall, worst public toilet I've seen thus far in New Zealand. There was raw sewage running through the back of it. And they sent me down to have a look at this and said, David, we don't know what to do with the toilet block. Anybody who's a little bit worried about why you got this crazy Australian dude to come over, you'll probably get a hint at this point. Because when I saw this toilet block, I was so wildly excited I almost wet my pants. Because I'm going to tell you something, the worse something is, and the greater the deficit is in your town, the greater the opportunity there is for transformation. I specialise in helping towns turn their deficits into assets, and nobody in town knew how to do it with this toilet block. They just thought we'd have to bulldoze it and start all over again. So I said to them, look, I think we could renovate it in 9 days. I think we can do it on a budget of $15,000, and council people, please ignore the bottom line there. We didn't have an approval plan for it, but we had an arrangement with council. It's a whole nother story. Okay, so this was perhaps maybe the most exciting 9 days I'd had for a long time. We actually made up the plan for this toilet block as we renovated it. So it depended what tradespeople we got on a day. And for 9 days we worked from crack of dawn until 1 o'clock the next morning, have a few hours sleep, get back up and in renovating it. This is what emerged out the other end. They are so proud of this toilet block, they created a postcard to sell to tourists. It's voted one of the top tourist attractions in the North Island. And have you ever seen that many tourists standing around studying a toilet block before? And the community said, look, if we had bulldozed it and started again, we could never have imagined creating something like this. Now, one of the things I've discovered about great places is that they are playful. The reason we love going somewhere is there's something playful about that space. You know, whether it's the Umbrella Arcade, whatever it is, playfulness is what makes great public spaces. And this is just a little bit of an advertisement for the 7-day makeover. If you don't have fun making it, it's probably not going to be a fun place to visit. So there will be lots of laughs, there will be lots of smiles as we make over your town centre, because that's the only way that we're going to get a really playful kind of space that people love to come. Now, the story in Paihia continues. Now, this might surprise you in a town that thinks that every car park in your town is sacred. Paihia looked at this car park that held 26 cars and said it is occupying our prime piece of real estate between the Bay of Islands, which is out here, and our town centre, which is here. By the way, the little town square that I showed you is in amongst those trees. That first project they did, the toilet block is up here. They had a discussion for 12 months. There were lots of people who thought it was crazy to get rid of the car parks, but eventually the community decided that they were going to get rid of them. This was a $150,000 community-driven project, most of the money raised by the op shop. This is the park that they created out of that car park. This is the opening of the park. And Paihia have developed a process that we use in all of our 7-day makeovers. It's done by creating project teams, and every project team has a project leader with a great deal of autonomy and their own budget. This is not a top-down process. This is lots of groups of people working on very specific projects. So there's a project team painting this area here. There was a project team for the piano. They had a budget of $68 for their particular project. There's another project team making these giant seats, and so it goes on. The little library was another project team. One of the things that we know is that people prefer to sit on anything other than a seat. So if you've only got park benches in your town, you've really limited the kind of spaces that people really enjoy spending some time. You can measure how great your town centre is by the number of people relaxing with their feet up, just making themselves at home, feeling like this is a great place to hang out. Now, incidentally, this park, the people of Paihia said, where did all these people go before we built the park? They just sit in their hotel rooms watching TV. They were absolutely blown away by how this attracted people. I talked to one family that had come from another adjoining town, and they said, we come over here about once a month and spend the day here. Our kids just love coming to this particular park. So if you create these kind of facilities, you start to create a magnet for people to come, and the life generates life. There should be a photo opportunity. Incidentally, this is a fountain that I built for the town of Paihia. And so Paihia has now done about 20 of these makeovers. It's actually a lot more than that now, but at this stage, so this pontoon was a community project just another one of the makeovers. They've won a whole stack of awards, including the Community of the Year. They're always offered some awards, getting an award for what their town has achieved. Now we call this an agile approach. You can see how this is very different to master planning or the way that the town was heading at the start with their big vision. You start with one small space, you then just keep building on it incrementally, bit by bit, until you've transformed your whole town centre. And that might take 20 makeovers, whatever. Jeff and I worked together for a few years, and here in New Zealand and in Australia, we tried to replicate what we'd done in Paihia. And it was a 12-week process. We would run a 2-day workshop. We would get the project sorted out. We would get all the project teams lined up, and then we'd say to them, you've got 12 weeks to get organised for the makeover, and that'll be a 3 or 4 day event. Can anybody guess what happened in the 12 weeks that we were back in Australia? Well, no, lots of stuff happened. It was all talk. Lots of committee meetings. Even though we'd strictly forbidden them to have any committee meetings, they would still meet every week, and they would argue about the colour of the pots or the species of the trees that were to go in, etc. Now, in one town here in New Zealand, it's probably been about 4 years since we did that exercise, and they're still arguing about how they're going to make it happen. It never ever got off the ground. There's another town here in New Zealand where one naysayer in the town got the entire project closed down in that 12-week intervention. So I had a good look at this, what's going wrong here, and the issue is that communities have never ever had an experience of working in the way that I've just described to you. The way that councils have always engaged you is to bring you in, sit around a table, talk about what you'd like for your town centre, put it in a report. We're addicted to this meeting approach, this constant planning approach to trying to create change. Are you with me? Both the council is addicted to that, and so are communities. And when I try to describe a more agile approach, people look at me blankly. How would we make that happen? So that's why we created the 7-day makeover. In essence, what we did is we just simply chopped the 12 weeks out and said we're going straight from the 2-day workshop into making it happen, so you've got no time to have any meetings. Okay, so now I'm just going to describe how the process works so that you know how we actually go about doing it. So this is what we call the promo visit, and tonight is an important part of that, where I inform the community about how the process works, how you can get involved. But another very important activity is that we've been working with council staff today to create what we call the What is Allowed document. Now what this is, and we've agreed on this, so this is all in place now, we have a 1-page A4 document that spells out exactly what you are allowed to do within the 7-day makeover without it being, so I'll just give an example. So it says things like, as long as you leave, you can do whatever you like, as long as you leave 1.8 metres of continuous walkway on the footpath. So it's what do we actually want to achieve? Well, we want people to be able to move along the footpath, people with disabilities, etc. What width does that need to be? Well, let's try 1.8 metres. So we've agreed on that. The other thing we've agreed on is that anything that is movable is instantly permissible. Because if they don't like where it is, they retain the right to move it somewhere else. So you see, we've constructed this set of rules, and when you come to do the 7-day makeover with me, I will be encouraging you to do everything so it is movable. It's a bit like in your lounge room. How many people have got your lounge room furniture bolted to the floor? And yet that's what we do in our cities. Everything's bolted down, and then we get tired of the space. Just like if you had all your lounge room furniture bolted to the floor, you'd get sick of the layout pretty quick. There's no flexibility in it. And so I will be encouraging you to create everything so that it is movable, so you can reconfigure your town. If it doesn't work, you move it somewhere else and you experiment with it. So we've got this document, which will be our guiding document for the 7-day makeover. Now, when I come back in about 3.5 weeks' time for the actual makeover, end of November, on day 1, I will give you a little bit more information about the art of placemaking, but the next thing that we do is we will go and explore your town centre, and I will point out to you, and some of this will be the work that Jeff is going to do between now and then, but I will point out to you what's working in your town, what's not working, why it's not working, what the possibilities are for changing that and making it work. So, for example, we will look at where are the linger nodes in your street that slow people flow. Okay, but you understand what I'm saying. So, but I will then point out and say, well, there's a space that you could have a linger node. There is a space that you could have a linger node, and you could do X, Y, or Z in that space. So we will explore your town centre, what the opportunities are. We will then decide the makeover site or sites. So it may be a number of sites that we decide on, quite possibly it will be, but there will be some logic to why we choose those sites. If you understand that there will be, it's not just a random selection, it is about what are the strategic spaces in your town centre that need to be brought to life as the first step in reanimating your city. So if you go back to the Pioneer example, it's that one dead spot. Let's make that over, and we'll build off of that. You'll then be broken up into small groups, and one of the reasons why I'm not asking you for ideas tonight is I don't want to pollute the process of generating the widest possible interventions possible. So on that first day, we break you up into small groups, and each group works on a plan for the town centre. And that might be just one spot, it might be a couple of spots, but it's whatever that group's ideas are for the town centre. We get you to make little models of it, you know, whatever way you can kind of represent your ideas. People get really creative. We then go around and we evaluate every table's plans, and we say, okay, teams, what did you love about what this table put up? What ideas does it trigger for you? What improvements would you suggest, etc. So we have a bit of a discussion about each of the plans that each of the tables put up. Now we've slightly modified the process. What we do at the end of day 1 is that we then say so if all of you people were there, we would say to you, what idea have you heard today that you are so excited about that you're prepared to give 10 minutes or more to helping make that idea happen? And we get everybody gathered around, you know, so somebody might say, well, I want to make the ferry garden. And so they'll come out the front and they'll have a ferry garden sign. And then everybody else in the audience that would like to help with that project, they're really excited to go and stand with that person. I do not dictate what the plan is for your town centre. It is about where the energy is in your community. What it is you want to invest some time in actually making happen determines what the plan will be. So then, come Sunday morning, which is the second day, you will already be in those little project teams. So, you know, there might be the ferry garden team, there might be the planting team, there might be the little library team, whatever they happen to be. And we give you a whiteboard and you start developing a plan for that particular project. So, what's it going to cost? What volunteers do you need? Etc. So we help you create a little project plan, And then we have a review. So we look at everybody's project plans, and some of them will need to be parked because we mightn't have the money for them, or there might be some other reason they're not going to work. By about lunchtime on Sunday, we will have sorted out which are the viable projects, and they'll have to fit within the budget. And so the project teams will be set up. They'll be starting to develop how they're going to do things. Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, it's not the evening, I must update my slides. We have the volunteers briefing. That's all the people who can't come to those 2 days. And each team will stand up and share what their particular idea is or what their project is. And then you get to choose which project team you'd like to go and join, and you help them do their planning. What are we going to do next? Days 3 to 7 of the makeover begins, and each team manages their own project. They're very, very autonomous. So you have to manage your own budget. You manage your own work hours. So if everybody can only work at a certain time, then you work that out in your particular team. You can work after hours if you like. Incidentally, this is a piece of pipe that we found in the council yard. So there's lots of stuff that we can do which cost absolutely nothing. So that was a little value add. And then we have a launch party. And what we do is we go around, and this is a fantastic thing on the Saturday morning. We go and we visit every little project. We get everybody that participated to come out the front. They get a certificate of appreciation. We wolf whistle, we clap, we congratulate them, and they feel proud as punch that they participated in whatever it is that was made. And now, I mentioned earlier the resources bank is a big key to this. Whatever you can lay your hands on is a potential asset that we can use in the makeover. This is in Mildura. They sent me photos of junk that the council had in their yard, and in the background I saw this bridge, and I quickly fired back an email and said, "Can I have the bridge?" And so we got that bridge. We got a crane donated to bring the bridge in at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that bridge formed just one of the projects in that particular makeover. You're going to have a lot of fun. We help you think outside the box. We have techniques for helping you think up really great ideas. Now here's an example of a real-world makeover. This is Martin here in New Zealand. Now, this is a typical space designed by a landscape architect. It looked very nice in its day, but its practicality as a people space leaves a little bit to desire. How easy is it to hold a conversation if you're sitting on that chair and your friend's on that one? And this is a major, if you look at the seats in most towns, they are not social seating. They don't encourage any social interaction whatsoever. So this is this space being transformed. This is where these seats were. Now, I just tell you the story about this because it's really important that you remain flexible during the process. That was to be a flat deck, like the one on the other side that you saw. We just pulled out the seat that you saw, that rickety old seat, and somebody walking past said to me, "Where's old Bill going to sit?" And I said, "Who's old Bill?" And they said, "Well, he sits down here 8 hours a day on this seat, and now you've taken it away." And I said, "He can sit on the deck." They said, "He's 80 years old, he's not going to be sitting on a deck." And I said, "All right, we'll put his park bench back, but we'll build it into the deck." And so I went and got an old refrigerator carton, and we traced the pattern for the park bench that had come out. And then I said, "Oh, let's put a flat bit on the top that kids will love to run along. It's another level of seating. People will sit up there." And then I went, "Now we've got to get it back down to the flat deck." oh my God, we could put a lovely banana lounge type thing in there. So this came spontaneously out of the process, and this is why this agile model, as opposed to, maybe a designer could have dreamed that up, but it was that casual conversation that led to the design of that particular deck. I'm really proud of that one. That's it from another angle, so that's the flat deck, and that's the other one, and you remember there were those rickety old seats at the front. Now on the other side of the road there's a mirror image, and over there they created a children's ferry garden with swing bridges, places for the adults to sit while their children went exploring, lots of little interactive things in there like gnomes, etc. We like to have a lot of fun, so little bridge you'll notice here. I think I might even have a close-up of that, yes. So there's always these little fun elements that we like to build into it. This is another one that we did just recently. A group of guys building a deck. People of all ages, we get CWA ladies making things. Everybody gets involved in these makeovers. So a little picnic shed that was transformed into a kids' play area, licorice, all sorts. Okay, we have important jobs for everybody, even if you think you can't paint or use a hammer or whatever. These are just some examples of jobs. We need a refreshments team, so that's somebody that provides morning and afternoon tea for the workers. It's great if we can bring all of the workers together at a set time. That's part of the whole community building, so the refreshments team is really important. Everybody has to sign in at a volunteers desk, so if we can have somebody who might have a broken leg or whatever, we've always got a role for people to staff the volunteers desk. Finance team, social media team, purchasing team. So there are all sorts of admin roles. If you can help us out, is great. Now, oh my God, I've left something on there I shouldn't. There's a free book online if you want to explore this further, a book called Place. So if you go to 7day.com.au and then you go to our Learning Centre, it'll take you to the Creative Communities website. And if you go to our Learning Centre, there's videos there, there's free ebooks. This one gives you 29 secrets of great places. So you can read up in advance, see lots of pictures of what people have done to create a sense of place. Now, semi-finally, the formal part of this is there's been a lot of debate in town, and I meant to mention I was going to answer this question about the cost of all of this. I've talked to council. I am more than happy to reveal what we are being paid and what you as a town are getting for that. This is the list of things that we have said we will deliver for council or for you as a town. Now, that bottom figure of $78,000 includes, we spend $600 on Facebook advertising to get people interested that you hear. It also includes the $22,000 makeover budget. It also includes things like we are bringing a top-notch set designer, a guy that I've worked with. He's worked on Spielberg movies, etc. He will come and add a real spark of genius to the makeover. He's included. All our travel and everything is included. We're going to have the whole thing professionally documented. You can read through the list there. We provide a total service from beginning to end. And so our total fee is that amount there. And then there's another $30,000 that is being spent on chef's services, which is part of the longer term city plan, which is something that is required by the legislation for the council to do. He has a very different approach. And if you've got questions about that, I'm sure I'd be happy to answer it. But the work that he does will actually inform the 7-day makeover. It will help us think holistically about where we should start. So the figure that's been bandied around of $108,000 is the sum of that fee and Jeff's fee and their two bits. Now, I'm going to make you a guarantee. For those of you who are worried about that figure there, we're going to spend a minimum of $22,000. Incidentally, we reserve another $2,000 for follow-up to that makeover so that you're not stuck just on the first makeover. You've actually got a kickstart for your second makeover. I will make you a guarantee. If we do not deliver that amount of value to your town, I'll give you your money back. And you can see from what we've done in other towns, those other ones, the Martin one, for example, that was a $5,000 makeover budget. And you can see the value that they got as a town out of that. All right, so I think we actually have a little bit of time for some questions.
What happened? Where did the cars go? Where did you put the cars?
Okay, where did the cars go? Okay, now this is a very interesting question. Whenever you have a town where everybody has to park outside of the shop that they're going to, you need many, many, many times more car parks in a town like that than you do in one where people are prepared to park their car and walk. Because people are moving their car from place to place, so you just need heaps and heaps more cars. Now, what has happened in a town like Westport, and this happens in towns all over Australia, New Zealand, is that your town becomes, the locals perceive your town as what I call an essentials-only shopping street. So you want to go and park your car, get the newspaper, move up the road, get the chops and go home. You just want to do the essentials and you want to be able to park outside. You are not there to be part of the civic life of your town or to engage with your neighbours or anything else. You're there to do some essential shopping and by God, I've got to get it done quickly. Now that requires a lot more car parks than a town where people are prepared to park and walk. Now here's the rub. People will not walk if your town's boring and there's nothing else for them to do, right? How many of you have ever been to Venice and complained like crazy that you had to leave your car at the big car park outside of Venice and catch a boat to your hotel? Are you with me? The more interesting the place, the more inconvenience you're prepared to put up with because the quality of the experience goes up. So what I want you to do is to reimagine your town as the kind of place where it's no longer just an essentials-only shopping street. Now, what's happened over time is that we used to, in our towns, have what would be a town square, or what I would call the civic heart of the town. Your town centre performed a number of functions which were civic, social, cultural, meeting other people, etc. Now, over time, what we've done is we've split off the civic functions of our town centre and the economic functions. So if you go to a Spanish town, for example, it's the socialising, it's the civic life of the street that feeds the economy of the town. And we've got to put those two things back together again. So the first thing we will do with your makeover here in your town, and you can start thinking about this, is if I ask you, where is the civic heart of your town? Where is the bit that you are really proud of, that's your lounge room for your town? That's the first thing we need to create for your town, okay? And what we've got to do is, over time, build a town that is so interesting that people don't mind parking. Trust me, you have got so much car parking that if you make an interesting town, you will have lots and lots of space that you can convert to more interesting uses than a car park. So that's the the short answer to that. Another question. Maybe it was the long answer. Sorry? Yeah, sure. Well, let me partly answer that question. I was in the Netherlands once and I was talking to one of the council, it was the mayor of the city, that's right, and he had an award on his desk. And I said, "What's the award for?" And he said, "We won an award for having the best climate for cycling." And I said, "How do you get an award for having the best climate for cycling?" And he laughed and he said, "Oh, no, not the physical climate, the political climate." So there are lots of places with worse climates, physical climates, but they have a much better attitudinal climate, and that's really the secret. Don't look. Let me answer your question in another way. I want to fire up your imagination. You see the climate as your deficit. I want to turn it into your greatest asset. Every time it rains, I want you to think, "Thank God it's raining because our town is shining." And you know how you're going to do it? We might even do this in the makeover. We're going to have giant pots full of umbrellas with "Welcome to sunny Westport" stenciled on them. And if you need to walk down, you get out of your car, you can pick up a brolly, walk down the street, put it back in the next one, and they'll look after themselves. So just friggin' get creative about how you turn whatever you perceive your deficit is into an asset. I was in a town where they wanted to spend $500,000 putting a roof over an arcade because it rained. And I said, for God's sake, just put a pot of umbrellas at either end of the arcade, and that's a much more interesting experience for the customer than having a roof over the top of it. Let me just give you one other example. You got me fired up on this one now. I was working in another town, and they were complaining about lack of toilets. Now, I love to do an experiment. I know the council would spend at least $250,000 to build a new toilet block. So I always go, what could I do if I only had half that amount of money? I went back to my hotel room, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking, toilets. There's plenty of toilets in this town. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that they've all got for customer only or staff only screwed to the door. So with my $100,000, what I'll do is I'll invest in 10 red buckets. And I'll put $10,000 in each red bucket. And I will say, any retailer willing to take the for customer only sign off your door, we will give you a bucket of $10,000 in it, and we will employ an artist to help you make the funkiest toilet in town. And I can tell you what's going to happen. We'll produce a little map that shows tourists where the 10 toilets that are open to the public are in the local retailers' shops. And before long, people are going to be turning off of the highway to come and do the funky toilet tour. And when they walk into your shop, they're going to feel obligated to buy something because they had such a great experience in your toilet. Okay? We've just got to think outside the box. You saw what happened with the Pie toilet. It is possible to turn a toilet into a tourist attraction. Now, I said to the retailers this morning, and I'll throw the challenge out here, the greatest asset your town could have to attract tourists to this town is extreme generosity. If you had 10 retailers in town that not only provided really funky toilets where you went in and you just went, wow, but there was a couple that had a baby change area. a couple that had water. If you start to think about what does the traveller need when they arrive in our town and go, let's not only give that to them, but let's give it to them with extreme generosity and with a whole lot of pizzazz added to us meeting that need. You'd put yourself on the map tomorrow. Go and have a look at the reviews of the services in your town. I promise you that is the most revolutionary thing your town could do to lift itself up by its own bootstraps, is just pure generosity. Told you I was fired up. Okay. Another question. Nobody's going to ask a question after setting me off on that one, are you? Poor bastards.
For the people who haven't come tonight, how do you recommend that we encourage other people, to get involved when we are actually doing this?
Okay.
How do we convince them?
Okay, so there's a whole lot of resources on the website. There's videos of other makeovers. There's videos that explain the process. So they can go and have a look at that. There's downloadable brochure things that explain the process, a volunteer's guide we call it. There's the little summary cards you can pick up on your way out and encourage them to come along to the workshop. If they can't come for the workshop, really encourage them to come to the volunteers briefing on the Sunday afternoon. It means they've only got to commit an hour. They can come along and see what's happening and get involved. If they can't do that, then just pop into the coordination point. We will have some point where everything's run out of for the makeover. I think it's actually going to be in this space here somewhere. So encourage them to come. And we will have all of the projects up on a wall that they can look at and go, wow, I'd like to get involved in that particular one. Yep. But really, I want you to think about too what resources that you can tap into. We've been talking to some people today, some business people in town who are going to help in a very substantial way. But if people have got access to laser cutting or whatever, all of those are really important things that come into our resources bank that enable us to be able to do stuff in a very quick time frame. Any other questions? If it rains all week? Yeah, free umbrellas. No, we just have to take that as it comes. And we've had 2 or 3 days washed out on makeovers, and we just have to regroup. It is really fly by the seat of our pants. It's exactly the same as if you were renovating your house. You know, if it rains, then you've just got to adapt to whatever that is. So, you know, unless that happens, you know, sometimes we've then had to outsource stuff into people who've got covered work areas, for example. So instead of doing it on site, we have to do it off site. You know, you have to in this business, man. You know, earlier this year I had a heart attack because I'd done 7 of these in a row, and there's a shitload of stress associated with keeping these things on, you know, with rain days and all sorts of things happening. So, no, that's just part of the deal. Yes? All right, we'll make this the final question, and I am so glad it is the final question. Does anybody know what happens if you have a child who, from the day the child is born, every morning you say to them, you are going to grow up to be a thief and a robber. You are the most untrustworthy child I've ever had the privilege of parenting. Anybody got any idea what happens to that child? Yeah, somebody's volunteering. That was my mum and dad. They're highly likely to turn out exactly as you've prophesied. And this is probably one of the most revolutionary things I'll say to you. Almost everything that we do to try and stop vandalism in a town actually promotes vandalism. Because what we're doing, and I'll tell you a quick story which will illustrate it. So I did a workshop in Fremantle, and the mayor was in that workshop. It was a 2-day workshop. They've been trying to animate their town square for a number of years. King Square it was called. And they'd installed 2 table tennis tables in King Square. And like most councils, they were paranoid about the bats and balls getting stolen. And so they came up with a very clever scheme, which was they gave the bats and balls to a retailer, and if you wanted to have a game of table tennis, you would go and leave your ID with the retailer, get the bats and balls, have a game. And the mayor walked out of the workshop and he said, "Oh my God, that arrangement tells every single resident of our town that we don't trust them, that they're a thief and a robber," and they says the same thing to every visitor. Let's do an experiment. Let's leave the bats and balls on the tables 24/7. About 2 months later, he sent me an email and he said, "My godfather, it is costing us $20 a month to replace the bats and balls that go missing. It is the cheapest investment we ever made in bringing King Square to life. You see, we are prepared to stop bad things happening, but we are not prepared to build trust and tell people that we trust them. And it will cost you money. Things will go missing. Things will get vandalised. But if you go down the path of chaining everything down, bolting everything down, all you do is promote distrust in your town." I was in one town where they'd microchip in all of their rubbish bins because people were stealing rubbish bins. I said, "Has anybody done a cost-benefit analysis on this? You could afford to buy 1,000 bins for the price of the microchipping, put them in your town square and say, anybody that needs a bin, for God's sake, come down and pick one up." Trust begets trust. And look, and honestly, we've had the most heartwarming stories over time. Recently, we did a makeover in a little country town where they decided they were going to they created a scooter track for kids in a park, and they put 4 scooters out for kids to ride around this track. And everybody in town said they'll be gone within the weekend. Now, can I say your town's story is your biggest downfall? If you are saying to yourself, we have a town full of vandals and thieves and robbers, that will limit what you are willing to do in your town. And we'll put a ceiling on what is possible for your town. Now, what has happened there, 4 months has gone by and the 4 scooters are still there and the town is going, oh my God, we're a much more trustworthy town than we thought we were. So this is about changing the story that you tell about your town. So back to the Fremantle example, I then encourage them to put out loose furniture in their King Square. Now, this is a nightclub area, and all the yobbos from Perth come up to Fremantle on the weekend for a party, and they said the tables and chairs will end up through the windows, they'll end up out in the street. So they paid somebody to bring them in every night. And I came back and said, no, you put them out 24/7, do it for 2 months, and see what happens. And again, I got an email from the mayor saying, after 2 months, we've worked out it is cheaper to replace the small number of chairs and tables that go missing than it was to pay the person to bring them in every night. And now our square is alive 24/7 because we've got all the backpackers down there checking their emails. So I have story after story after story that if you invest in trust, and as I explained to the council staff this morning, this is about being sensible. We often make little cube seats, for example, and we always put 2 bricks in the bottom of them. It's just enough so you can still move it, but it's a bit harder to take it and put it in the boot of your car. So, there's a sensible way of doing it. But you've got to, as a town, invest in trust, invest in your generosity, and it will be remarkable what becomes of your town. I can't wait to come back and do the makeover with you. I hope you're just as excited as I am.